Hi there, Booktube. It's very nearly the end of June and time for me to do a video about my July reading plans. Why do I do these videos? Partly to kind of fix my plans for the month in my head a little and sort of kind of commit. Although, we never have to read the things we say we're going to read, but generally I do. It means I can get your thoughts on things that I'm planning on reading, which I always really appreciate. I use it as a chance to flag some reading events that I'm planning on taking part on that, might interest you. Now, I've realised that when I do that sort of right at the end of the month, right before a month starts, that might be a bit late in the day for some people if you haven't already heard or plan to take part in these things. So I'm going to mention a couple of August things now at the beginning of this video before I go on to my July plans. Now, one of those is that for several years now, I've been part of a group that reads a book by William Faulkner in August. So watch out for Faulkner in August announcements coming very soon. If you've always meant to read something by William Faulkner, this is your chance to do it with a sort of friendly and supportive group. If you're a Faulkner enthusiast, this is a chance to join some other Faulkner enthusiasts and, enjoy talking about a book by Faulkner. And taking part in Faulkner in August, I've switched from being that kind of newbie to that kind of enthusiast, which is lovely. The most popular August event on Booktube, however, I think, is GarbAugust, which is all about reading kind of like pulp fiction, I guess is how you might describe it. Lots of hosts, I won't go into those here, but it's one that I've never tried. But this August, I might just dip my toe into GarbAugust. We'll see. I'm thinking about it. You can encourage me if you like, and give me some suggestions of what sort of thing I might read. But August for me is always associated with it being Women in Translation Month. Now, there's no longer a kind of organised Women in Translation Month readathon, but I know lots of us try to make an extra effort to read Women in Translation in August. I absolutely will be, and I'll be doing some associated videos and sort of, not quite a readathon, but giving it a bit of oomph, from me at least. Now, obviously, this year I'm involved in reading the Globe, led by Katja, but a couple of others of us are sort of hosting strands of that. And the YA strand that's jointly hosted by Jag is, and I'll put details of people's channels and so on down below, but the August book for that is by a woman. It is Women in Translation, and it's Reckless by Cornelia Funke. Now, our Reading the Globe contemporary choice is not by a woman. It's more of a big book summer choice, I suppose, because it's Old Kiln by Jia Pingwa, Chinese author. I'm wanting to mention it now because it is a real chunker. It's a bit of a mammoth, and so you need to know about it far enough in advance that you can plan to fit that into your summer and into your August. So I'm flagging that one now. But July for me, let's get on to July, because July is all about, nearly all about, Jane Austen July. Austen, one of my all-time absolute favourite authors. And so Jane Austen July, hosted by Katie and Marissa and Claudia, is like one of my just favourite events of the year, favourite moments of the year, indeed. Now, there's a Discord server for this year for the first time, and that's already buzzing with people putting up their TBRs and sharing recommendations and getting excited. But it's not too late to join, and as I say, I'll put some sort of links below for you. Because to take part, you only have to read one thing by Jane Austen, and you're part of Jane Austen July, but there are other prompts, and I always do all the reading prompts. There's watching prompts too, and I don't always do those because that's not so much my thing, but I may. But I'm going to talk about what I'm going to do for the reading prompts. Now, prompt number one always is to read one of Jane Austen's 6 main novels. And this year I'm going to read Emma. It's the group read, and I don't always take part in the Jane Austen July group read, but I decided I would this year, and we'll be reading 2 chapters a day because it's an Austen that I've read. Well, all the main novels I've read more than once, and Emma's one that I've read several times. So I'm going to try it on audio because I'm getting a real taste for audiobooks these days, and I'm going to listen to the version that's read by Jenny Agutter and see what I make of that. If you've read Emma, you will know what you think of Emma. If you haven't read Emma, I think it's quite it's not a bad sort of Austen to start with. You know, if you're new to Jane Austen, it's got lots of humour. It's got some really interesting characters, including a sort of a slightly not entirely likeable, except that in the end you do like her very much indeed, I think, main character, Emma, and some nice kind of plot twists to keep you interested. So, the second prompt is always to read something else by Jane Austen that isn't one of her 6 main novels. And I've read everything now, from her prayers and her poetry to her juvenilia, the lot. The only thing that I've not completed reading by Jane Austen, or the unfinished novels, that's so many options. I'm gradually now working my way through Jane Austen's letters. Very witty, very entertaining, quite snarky. But this, I find letters slow reading, so I'm reading some every year, and I've got a lovely new edition. I mean, it's not new, it's new to me, edition of the letters with illustrations and so on. And if you think, oh goodness me, that looks far too enormous, how could you possibly read all of that ever? Well, I am spreading it out over time, but actually about half of at least a third of the book is notes and index and related, so it's not quite as chunky as it looks, and as I say, gives you real insight into Austen's character. And these are just the letters that her sister Cassandra spared from burning. And you wonder what naughtiness was in the ones that she chose to burn, because even these are quite sharp at times. So that's the Austen reading. But then there are other reading prompts. One is to read either a retelling, a modern writer's retelling of an Austen novel, or a historical fiction set at the time of Jane Austen's life. So you've got two options there. Now, this is the reading prompt that I have the most wobbles with often, because if I read an Austen retelling that's like a kind of, a sequel to one of her novels or something, and it's someone kind of almost like trying to do Austen, that never really works for me. But I'm hopeful about my choice this year, because I'm going to read This Motherless Land. Came out earlier this year, I think, or at the end of 2024. Yeah, it's new. It's by British Nigerian author Nikki May. It's a modern retelling of Mansfield Park, one of my favourite of the main novels. It's set in both Nigeria and England. It's meant to be lively, about family, about sort of belonging and so on, as Mansfield Park is, a bit sort of decolonialised, I suppose, retelling, but one of those retellings that's quite loosely based on the original. It's not a literal kind of removing Mansfield Park into a modern setting. It's inspired by Mansfield Park, and so fingers crossed that one's going to work better for me than some of the things I've read in previous Jane Austen Julys. And Tilly and I are both reading it, and it's going to be our contemporary fiction discussion video for July. Now, thinking of contemporary, one of the prompts is to read something by one of Jane Austen's contemporaries. So a writer that was writing, a writer that she would have read, or that was writing at the same time as her, or just after, in the same broad period. And this year, I'm going to read The Female Quixote by Charlotte Lennox, which was published in 1752. Now, Lennox is sort of, her life overlaps with Jane Austen, but obviously being published in 1752, this book slightly predates Austen's writing career. But, and this is the important but, it's a book that we know that she read because she directly used it as a sort of an inspiration of Northanger Abbey. And I've just started listening to it, and immediately I can see how it was a jumping off point for Northanger Abbey for her, because it's about a young woman who falls into the trap of taking the fiction that she writes a little too literally as a sort of guide to what to expect in life and love, just like Catherine Morland in Northanger Abbey. Now, Lennox is one of the authors that features in one of my nonfiction books that I'm reading for the nonfiction prompt of Jane Austen July. So the nonfiction prompt is to read a book that's about Austen's work or Austen's life, or about the history of Austen's time. So, about Regency England, or, how people lived then, or events then, or, so it's sort of non-fiction about Austen's world one way or another, or her writing. And just recently out is a book called Jane Austen's Bookshelf by Rebecca Romney. And it's about collecting books by authors that Jane Austen read, and that were sort of contemporary or immediately before Austen, and that we think, will probably have influenced her writing. And certainly, Austen did not appear out of nowhere, although she is unique in her writing style and how she brought the novel sort of a leap forward. But there were other women writing before and around her time, and that's what Jane Austen's Bookshelf kind of looks at. I'm buddy reading it with Katie and with Charlotte at Quenny Reads. And as I say, Lennox is one of the women authors who features in it. As a bit of a complementary pairing to that, I'm going to read a second non-fiction book called What Jane Austen's Characters Read and Why. And this one's by Susan Allen Ford. This came out in 2024. And it's about, well, again, we know Austen was a voracious reader. Okay. She then uses books in her novels, not just, to inspire her writing, but she mentions books in her novels and makes her characters read certain books or types of book, certain authors. And what this book, I think, explains is that's not a neutral thing. She's deliberately using them to tell us things about those characters. And yeah, I'm very intrigued by that as a thought. And it's something that will add to my rereading of Austen's novels, which I do. So, it's nice to get a new perspective on those. Another different perspective is how Austen uses food and meal times and the preparation of food and hospitality in her books, again, to tell us things about her characters. And if I have enough time, I'm going to read Jane Austen and Food by Maggie Lane, that's the theme of that book. So, how she might use what characters eat to actually, imply something about their moral character or their position in society. Sounds fascinating, doesn't it? And will also mean that I learn a bit more about eating habits and etiquette and so on of the time, which means that if I read that, it'll be a nice fit for this quarter of Historathon, which is to read something that's non-fiction historical work for the period 1500 to 1820. So spot on if I get to read that. If I don't get to read it in July, I'll read it in August. So that's my Jane Austen July reading. Plenty to be going on with, but of course that's not all I'm reading in July, because I've got other things that I'm sort of committed to. Now, I have a real life book group, and each month we choose a book, and this month's book is Days at the Morisaki Bookshop by Satoshi Yagisawa, translated by Eric Ozawa. It's a book that's had lots of love around BookTube. It's short, it's quite warm-hearted, it's about the joys of reading and the benefits of books and reading, I think, but in fiction, a fictionalized form. It sounds lovely, relatively cozy from my point of view, but I think it'll be a nice little interlude. It's very short, so that's that. Another short book in translation that I will be reading, which is a lot less cozy, I think, is our Reading the Globe Contemporary Choice, and that's Standing Heavy by GauZ. So he's French Ivorian, from Côte d'Ivoire. I think it was published in French in 2014, but the translation by Wynne is more recent. So it was actually shortlisted for the International Booker in 2023, so not long ago. It's meant to be a bit dark, a bit bitter, a bit satirical, really, but looking at sort of the past 60 years in Paris, and looking at African immigrants in Paris working as like security guards, hence the Standing Heavy of the translated title, and using that as a lens, I suppose, to look at French society and attitudes to migrants and various things. I think it's going to be interesting, and it's just a little one, which is probably lucky given all the other things that I have in mind to read. Now, Reading the Globe also has a classics strand, as you may know, and the Reading the Globe classic for July is one that I really want to read, so I'm really hoping to fit this in as well, and that's God's Bits of Wood by Ousmane Sembène. It's from 1960. Again, Francophone African author. He's from Senegal, and it was written in 1960, and then the translation, I think, was in the 70s by Francis Price. That's a translation into English. He is seen as one of the greatest 20th century writers from West Africa, and I meant to read a book by him forever, and this is considered his masterpiece. It's about a strike on the Dakar Niger railway line in the 1940s. Join us if you fancy for either this or God's Bits of Wood. Now, I've got another modern classic to read this month, which is from kind of the other side of Africa, the northeast, because it's by the Egyptian, again, a modern classic, the Egyptian author Naguib Mahfouz. It's Palace of Desire. It's book 2 in his Cairo trilogy. If you've never read anything by Mahfouz, I would really recommend Palace Walk, which was the first book in this trilogy. It's kind of like a bit of a family saga set in Cairo. It was, when was this published? 1957. there you go. And the translation is by William Maynard Hutchins. And yeah, I'm buddy reading it with Erin. I talked about it in my May TBR video because we were going to read it in May, but it got postponed for various reasons to June. So I'm going to get to this one now, and I'm really looking forward to getting back to the family that I met in Palace Walk. Now we're nearly there, but I have got a couple more, and I've got another classic in translation that I'm going to read, but this one is a play. Okay, and it's from Russia, and it's a bit older. It's from 1903, and that's The Cherry Orchard by Anton Chekhov. Now, I've mentioned each month, I think, this year, that Angelia is hosting a group read-along of plays all through 2025, and she picks one or two, usually two plays each month, and I'm trying to read at least one of them. And The Cherry Orchard is one of this month's too, and it's a play that I read many years ago and I've seen many years ago, and I'm really looking forward to revisiting it. So I couldn't resist joining in with that one, even though I've got more than enough reading already lined up. And one more book that I'm definitely going to read, and no question about that, in July, has, strangely enough, a drama connection, okay, because it is Between the Acts by Virginia Woolf. And this has kind of like a play within a play kind of structure, because it's set in an English village on one day, and it's the day of the village pageant, or sort of like village play. All the village get involved in this play. And Woolf, this is Woolf's last novel that was published just after she died. It's complete. She had completed it, but she hadn't finished revising it before she died. So, and she was quite an obsessive reviser of her books. So, it's not exactly as she wanted it to be when it was published. But, Leonard Woolf felt that it was right to publish it. It was complete enough, and it's the last book one of in my mission to read all of Woolf's novels, but it is, as I say, her last one, published posthumously. And I'm buddy reading it with Jo Smith, buddy reader extraordinaire. So that is my complete July. I was lucky. It's another short one, so I'll be all right, won't I? That's my July. A couple of things may end up rolling over a bit into August. It doesn't matter. That's fine. I would love to hear your plans for July. If you are taking part in Joining Austen July, I've probably already heard them on the Discord server, haven't I? But if you've got comments on the other things that I'm reading this month, I would love to hear them in the comments on this video. And have a brilliant reading July.